Hello everyone. The sun has officially ingressed into Scorpio, and today, as I record this video, it's October 25th, 2022, and we are experiencing a new moon eclipse in Scorpio at exactly 2 degrees. So it's a sun-moon conjunction at 2 degrees and 0 minutes. And in this new moon, we also have Venus, which is the planetary guide or ruler of Taurus, where the North Node is at the moment. And it's also a co-ruler of Libra consciousness. And so Venus is conjunct this new moon, and it's at 2 degrees of 40 minutes, which is pretty prominent. So I'm going to talk about this new moon eclipse. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to pull a archetype card from Carolyn Myss Archetype Cards as a collective contemplation and, of course, individual contemplation, a card to really contemplate as we move through this eclipse, as well as Scorpio season of 2022, and as the sun shines a light on our own Scorpio consciousness. Remember that the south node of the moon at the moment is in Scorpio, and so this is a south node eclipse that we're experiencing. And when we're experiencing a south node eclipse, really the way that I translate this is that, it is a solar eclipse. A new moon is always going to be a solar eclipse, and it's a south node eclipse. And so this is really about this new internal seed point in regards to our Scorpio consciousness, but also what is it that we are letting go of in our lives or discarding in our lives emotionally in order to tend to something new in our own relationship to our Scorpio consciousness. And this can also, of course, translate into our relationship, not only with ourselves, but also relationships with anything and everything in the outside world, especially because Venus is conjunct this new moon. And so this really accentuates this Venusian quality around, what is it that we're really cultivating in this Taurus Scorpio axis of consciousness, how it is that we're really seeding a new way in which we're empowering ourselves, empowering others, and how we're embodying this empowerment through that North Node in Taurus. Interestingly, in this eclipse chart, that Sun-Moon conjunction with Venus is in a quincunx with Jupiter retrograde in Aries. Jupiter is at about 19 minutes of Aries, so it's at the 0 degree, only 19 minutes. So it's retrograding back into Pisces. And with Jupiter there and with this quincunx, the quincunx always implies there's adjustment to be made. And the way that I look at quincunx is it's kind of like you're driving in your vehicle and there's a blind spot, and we know each vehicle has a different blind spot, right? So it's a spot that, when we're driving, we do have to take a moment to adjust to that blind spot. It's something that we have to keep in our consciousness so that we are accommodating for this particular angle of perception that we may not quite initially and always see. It's not always extremely apparent, right? And so this adjustment with the Sun, Moon, Venus, and Jupiter retrograde in Aries, this to me really speaks to our beliefs, what we believe about our own personal needs, and how that translates in our relationships, as well as our beliefs in regards to others' needs, and how that we relate to their needs, right? So there's an adjustment to be made. This is part of this new moon seed point that we want to keep in mind. Also, what's interesting is that Mercury is in Libra. It's in a waxing or approaching a trine to Mars in Gemini. Mars in Gemini is, a Mercury ruled sign. So Gemini is guided by Mercury. And with Mercury in Libra coming into a trine with Mars, this is this easy flow and aspect around perceptions, communications that can be happening in our relationships, but also in our own perceptions around our own needs and relationship. And then what's interesting is that, remember that Mars is stationing. It's in its station point right now because Mars is going to go retrograde on October 30th. And Mars is a co-ruler to this new moon because the new moon's in Scorpio. There's two planetary guides or rulers to this new moon. So that's Mars and Pluto. And Pluto is really the unconscious defaults, is the feminine side of Scorpio. This part of us that has these settings of an automatic defaults, automatic pilots in regards to acting on behalf of our own needs, how we act on behalf of others' needs or the environment, right? And interestingly, Mars in Gemini is in a quincunx to Pluto, the other planetary ruler of this new moon. And Pluto's in Capricorn. It is direct, but again, Mars is about to go retrograde. So this is an interesting piece because this is really, when Mars goes retrograde in Gemini, this is going to be really looking at, our own Mars consciousness, our Yang consciousness, how we act on behalf of our own empowerment in any given situation, our own emotional security in any given situation, how it is we direct and funnel our Mars consciousness, because we're talking about Pluto and Capricorn. So what are the parameters by which we desire to really navigate specific situations where we're funneling our consciousness and directing our consciousness in the way in which we desire, in the way in which it's going to actually be empowering us, as well as empowering what it is we choose to build. And so, and what it is we choose to grow in this seed point, right? So there's this interesting adjustments that we're wanting to keep in mind, and particularly those two, right? These two different quincunxes that are happening there, that is about, making some adjustments and utilizing this mercurial energy, this discernment piece around what it is we desire to cultivate, so that nutrients, thinking of, our consciousness is actually really supporting and nourishing that which we desire to embody and that which we desire to grow and build. And any eclipse is going to actually translate, but even any new moon is going to translate into the full moon in Scorpio in the spring, or wherever you are in the world in the next eclipse season, when we'll be experiencing a new moon in Taurus and a full moon in Scorpio. So whatever it is we're seeding now is actually going to be growing and flourishing all the way through this next eclipse season. And so keeping these things in mind, and so Saturn just went direct in Aquarius, and, you know, this can again point to this funneling of consciousness in the way in which we desire. And also wanted to be sure to talk about how the Venus star point has just shifted as well. And so this Venus star point, where the sun was in, or Venus was in Cazimi, which means just in the same degree of the sun, right? And so this is actually like a birthing point where Venus is actually beginning a new cycle with one of her star points being in Libra. So it's been in Scorpio. We'll have one more Venus Sun conjunction in Scorpio on October 23rd of 2026. And then it'll be in Libra for 100 years. So these Venus conjunct the suns will happen, Venus conjunct the sun experience will happen in Libra for about 100 years. And so this is really moving the collective consciousness, and of course that means the individual consciousness as well, into really focusing and funneling our Venusian consciousness in regards to moving away from Scorpio themes into more Libran themes. And this is really about, you know, moving from where we can experience intimacy. What is it that actually inhibits intimacy? What is it that empowers intimacy? What is true empowerment? Experiencing potentially, you know, hoarding of power, resources, relationships, could have been betrayals of trust, fears, vulnerabilities, sexuality, and all of the things that actually enhance those things, all of the things that distort those things, right? Now we're going to be moving into Libra, where it's about really experiencing the things that are going to enhance equality and really valuing our own personal needs and the needs of others, and really understanding what equality is truly about. And so it'll also have this emphasis on beauty and harmony and so much more. And I'm sure this will come more into the conversation as well. But again, with Libra, it's always going to be about, you know, are we regenerating energy when we're interacting with others? Or is it imbalanced? Is there really this lopsided instability because one person's needs are being met and one person's needs are not being met? You know, so this is really about learning that balance and the importance of that balance in any given situation and in any given type of relationship, and how, you know, our differences are actually supportive of a more equal and holistic consciousness and evolution of consciousness. And so all things do require balance, so that all of our needs get met, so that we can all contribute our own, what we love and what we value and what is valuable to the collective consciousness. So I've got the chart here. I just want to make sure I haven't left anything out. Yeah, so I think that about covers it. So what I'm going to do is I am going to shuffle these cards. I shuffled them a bit before I came on, but I'm going to shuffle them a few more times. And I'm going to pick an archetype card for us as an archetype to contemplate as we're moving through this eclipse season, as well as the sun shining a light on our own Scorpio consciousness. And I'll come on here and do another video for the full moon lunar eclipse on November 8th. And that's an interesting eclipse coming because the moon will be conjunct Uranus. And so it's pretty exciting. So that'll be a video that will be coming. So one more thing is I want to give you some information about that Mars retrograde. So Mars retrogrades on October 30th. That's going to be at 25 degrees of Gemini, and it will actually go direct January 12th. At 8 degrees of Gemini. So you can look for that in your chart. What house is that traversing, right? Or houses? What aspects of life are you really pulling your energy and consciousness inward with that Mars action, and really assessing how you're really working with your Mars consciousness. And, you know, just remember that because it's in Gemini, this is going to be about, you know, really looking at, you know, are there areas where we're resisting specific ideas and or thoughts, perceptions, and what is the underlying reason for that? Like, what is it? And getting curious about our own consciousness and what's in the unconscious that actually has us resisting specific ideas, opposing points of view, you know, where Gemini, a really healthy Gemini consciousness knows that it's really this and that. It's not about necessarily resisting what seems to be opposite from us, but more about the inclusiveness of these two reference points. So it really is about this and that rather than this or that. And so when we have resistances to information, what is that giving us a clue about in regards to our own belief systems, and how our belief systems can change over time? Because as we actually are exposed to more and more information, we can actually be gathering a more holistic point of view. And so this is where Gemini knows, oh, it's, you know, it's great to actually look at different points of view. So I have more of a broader understanding of things, and I can make choices that are based upon what's actually supporting me in my evolutionary journey. And it doesn't necessarily invalidate other points of view. It just may not resonate with my own evolutionary purpose. And yet, all belief systems are really supportive in the sense that even though there may be something that's opposing our point of view, that actually is a support in disguise, so to say. So it's like, it's this supportive reference points that helps us and assists us to relate to ourselves in a deeper way, to understand ourselves and our own needs, our own values, and what is meaningful for us personally in our own evolutionary journey. And so as we recognize that, whether it's a point of view that opposes or whether it's a point of view that is in alignment with what we think, perceive, believe, is always in support of a broader understanding, always informing us of more of who we personally are and what is actually supportive and meaningful for us. And so if there's areas that we're finding ourselves resisting points of view, or irritated, frustrated, and this could be within communication as well, it's really just a really awesome opportunity to really get to know ourselves even more deeply and recognize, well, you know, what is that resistance? Is this just really giving me the cue to pivot in a new direction? Because Mars is really about pivoting. Mars desires to initiate new empowerment. Remember, its relationship to Pluto and Scorpio, and Mars' relationship as a ruler to Aries, where this is about initiating new consciousness in our own life experience and our own expression of consciousness as well. it's a cardinal sign, right, with Aries. And so this is about initiating new things, new perspectives, new experiences, right? So this is where, you know, we can notice where we might feel this momentum in consciousness, Mars, that can get frustrated, irritated, angry. But when we can recognize and actually translate that into a supportive influence rather than something that's actually, you know, an opposition or something that's conflicting, but rather than that, actually utilize it as information to initiate something new, maybe initiate a new direction, maybe pivot in a new way, maybe broaden our understanding of ourselves and what's in the unconscious. Remember that if we come up to fear or anything that is really uncomfortable, this is actually a cue that we're really not in alignment with our truth and what is actually our true identity, right? And so if we're experiencing fears in relationship to points of view or in our own thoughts and perceptions of what's happening in our lives, we can actually translate that into recognizing it's a supportive influence. It's potentially come into our conscious awareness to support us to pivot in the direction that is going to be most meaningful and beneficial for our own evolutionary momentum, our own evolutionary purpose, even when it's in disguise, even when it looks as if it is in conflict with what we desire. Sometimes it's through conflict that we can actually broaden our creative purpose and creative self-actualization, because it asks us to pivot in new ways or to see things in new ways. And so with Mars retrograde during that time frame, we can really be noticing our desire and our will kind of coming more inwards and assessing, maybe, you know, how have I been acting upon my own emotions, my own ideas, my own perceptions? And then, you know, is that working for me? Is that really in alignment with what I truly believe about my own identity and about what I'm initiating that's new in my life? And as well as initiating new ways of relating, maybe to our own lives, our own purpose, or those in our lives, right? Or things that are circumstances, situations in our lives. So this could be really helpful. And so let's pick a card. I don't want this video to be too long, so I'm going to pick a card from the Carolyn Myss deck. This is the deck here, the book that goes to the deck, and I love these cards. And so what would be the most beneficial card to assist us in navigating Scorpio season and the eclipse energies? Interesting. Prince. I feel like we've gotten this card before. So Carolyn Myss says the light attribute is romantic charm and potential for power. And the shadow attribute, using power for self-aggrandizement. So I always think of, you know, when I think of Prince, I think about Mars, because, you know, it's not the king, right? It's the prince. And so this is more of a, it's a younger, less mature archetypal energy. And so I would like look at this with Mars as being more Mars consciousness, and Saturn as being the more mature consciousness that develops through our Mars consciousness. Whereas Mars more like the adolescent, Saturn is where we've gained wisdom from the application of our yang energy and Mars energy, where, you know, Mars acts without forethought, takes 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? And the step back is really about, is there an adjustment to be made, you know? So that it can actually empower itself more and more and more. And this is its relationship to the quincunx of Mars with Pluto, as Mars is the ruler of Aries and Pluto the ruler of Scorpio. And this is how we evolve our consciousness in new ways, is this quincunx from Aries to Scorpio. And the adjustment that has to be made to create this self-mastery. And so when I talk about, you know, Mars with Saturn, again, Saturn is very much about self-mastery. And we build things with our yang energy. We build in the outside world. And the way I see it is that, you know, Saturn is the planetary guide or ruler of Capricorn, yin consciousness, how we assess our emotional security in the world, in any environment we find ourselves, and first and foremost in our own lives, right? In our own home, our own sanctuary, how we create a sanctuary for ourselves, a container for ourselves that feels secure in order to expand consciousness. And then we go out into the world, Aquarius, yang form of Saturn, and we build things in the outside world based on this internal security that we've cultivated, this sense of self-mastery that we've cultivated, and that we've continued into this external application of self-mastery. Interesting, we know Saturn's been in Aquarius, it just went direct, and, you know, Mars is about to go retrograde. So this is really about, okay, you know, Gemini and Aquarius, both air signs, and they're trine, right? So Mars and Saturn will trine in its retrograde phase. Let me see if I can find a date for you on that really quick. And if not, I'll just come back on here, but that would be interesting to know. So Saturn and Mars will trine at 19 degrees on November 28th. So check that out, because that could be a particular day. Give it 5 days before, 5 days after. That could be a specific time frame where we could be really getting some insights around how it is we want to make potential adjustments in what we're acting on, how we're acting on things, how we're working with the emotional component of our experience. You know, how are we working with any irritation, anger, frustration? How are we working with the emotional energy and pivoting that emotional energy into a productive experience for ourselves? How do we want to experience our emotional realm? You know, how do we want to experience really taking action towards our embodiment of what we desire and what we love and how we love in the world, how we contribute our light in the world, right? So that can be an important time frame to consider that. So going back to the card, Prince, you know, the light attribute is, as she says, romantic charm and potential for power. So, you know, the way I'm going to translate that, I mean, yes, it could absolutely have to do with romance and relationships and how we, you know, bring charm into our relationships, no matter what kind of relationship, and make it fun, exciting, you know, make it productive and energizing. That's romantic, you know, even if it's not necessarily like a love relationship, but just, you know, how we charm our relationships, how we create in our relationships, self-actualize in relationships or projects or creative endeavors. And then how that empowers us and brings power in our relationships, brings empowerment to others in relationship, how that regenerates power going both directions in relationship. And then, you know, I wanted to say with the shadow attribute, always think of the shadow as just things we haven't learned yet, things we don't know, places and points of consciousness that we haven't integrated yet. Maybe because we didn't have the tools to integrate them. Maybe we didn't have the psychological development to integrate them. And so this is, you know, the shadow where we have things to learn, where we have, you know, even maybe there was pain associated that we weren't ready to experience yet. This is where we want to be really allowing ourselves to feel so that we can get the information, we can get the psychological development that's going to actually fuel our power. Because whatever it is that we're fearing, the flip side of it is that it's actually our power. And it's actually likely, this fear of vulnerability is actually, when it's harnessed, we realize that it's our power, and it's been potentially locked away in a belief or a perception that is no longer resonant for us, that does not support us anymore. Maybe at one time it did support us, but it doesn't support us currently because we're evolving. We're moving through consciousness. We're totally new now. We're in a new dimension of our own being, a new dimension of our own consciousness. And so this is where always with Scorpio and Taurus, this can be, when the nodes are there, we can be shedding what is actually not resonant with our true power, particularly with the South Node in Scorpio, so that we can embody our true power. So when we've got the shadow attribute, using power for self-aggrandizement, this is where, you know, ultimately, this is where we can, coming from a place of lack of trust. So in other words, trusting in lack, trusting that we don't have power. Because when we use power for our own self-aggrandizement, we're funneling this consciousness in such a way that we're gripping on to power. We're not equally sharing power. We're not energizing others and empowering others. This is the, you know, exploration of Scorpio consciousness, is what is true power. Well, if we're holding and gripping and hoarding, which is a Taurus Scorpio theme, then we're actually unconsciously coming from a place that believes that you don't have power. And so this is why we want to really look at what are our beliefs about our own power, particularly in this new moon, because of the quincunx happening with Jupiter retrograde in Aries at the Aries point. You know, so we want to be really looking at what kind of thoughts, perceptions, beliefs have we picked up somewhere along the line. Could have been from family of origin, could have been from society, could have been cultural beliefs that were not, that were, you know, in a shadow experience, hadn't integrated this part of consciousness where, you know, it's coming from a place of trust in our abundance, trust in being resourced, because we are so connected to our own soul and evolutionary purpose, and therefore source, consciousness, the ultimate creator. We are an expression of that, so therefore we're naturally going to be supported by it. And if we're not believing that, then we can experience this desire to hoard or to use power for our own self-gratification and self-aggrandizement, as she says, which is not true power and not acting on behalf of our own, you know, what could be considered Prince energy, you know, this Mars consciousness that's actually really acting on behalf of empowerment, true empowerment. And so where we're cultivating our Mars energy into wisdom, our self-mastery with Saturn, as well as Scorpio, because Scorpio is also about self-mastery as well. It's about being able to traverse the uncomfortable parts of consciousness in order to come out like the phoenix anew, fresh and anew, where we have more power, we have more life force energy. We're almost like born again, right? Into a whole new, completely dimension of our own consciousness and own embodiment of that consciousness. And we're evolving, and we're also, you know, really expanding consciousness and contributing power in the world and power to the collective consciousness as well. So I hope this is helpful. Here's the card one more time. If you have any thoughts, questions, perceptions, anything you'd like to share about your own experience, of course, I would love to hear. And it always makes the conversation more rich. It always brings something to the table that anybody else that might read the comments might get something from. So please do feel free to share those. And then, and it's always more fun to interact, right? And then also, if you find this helpful, of course, you're welcome to share the video, like it. Of course, that helps distribute the video. And of course, if you subscribe, this also helps distribute my videos. So if you find this to be interesting, helpful in any way, and you do feel inclined to subscribe, please do. You can always click the notification bell if you'd like to be notified when I post new content. And so I just want to say blessings in this eclipse season, and may it be very rich for you and for all of us. And I'll see you in the next video.